Rise of Hawk, Part 2, Scene 21. Day 4, The Spy. It's the next morning, outside the new rebel base. Sitting on the roof of an abandoned apartment building, with a half-wall mostly hiding him from the view of the people below, Agent Bana Mallah watched down the sights of his sniper rifle. His crosshairs hovered over the face of a man standing in the entrance of the old building across the street. It was a face Bana knew from the most recent round of wanted posters. RoH. He had ebony hair that was peppered with grey, amber yellow eyes, and a broad-shouldered body. RoH laughed soundlessly and swaggered around like he owned the place. He walked to the driver's side of a white van and started up the engine. Half a dozen other rebels followed and got into the back of the van. When the sliding door was closed, the van moved off in a westerly direction towards the centre of town. Bana slowly pulled the sniper rifle from the edge and automatically disassembled it into a carry case at his feet. Despite it being an obvious rebel base below him, the signal tracker still insisted that there was an active mobile surveillance hub inside. How the rebels had captured a hub intact, and who was at fault, was a matter for some bureaucratic committee meeting sometime in the future. However, Bana and his wife Lee would recapture it and use the impromptu mission for their own political gain, perhaps a transfer for their little family to another city far, far away from his psychopathic brother Hoyle and his best buddy Jaron Cody Sr. He and Lee had watched the rebels since dawn. There'd been a lot of activity in and out of the old marble building, but no sign of another agent or task force group having picked up on the signal. The hub could be ripe for the take. Or just a tracker circuit could be inside and it's a trap, he thought cynically. Despite their being on opposite sides of this conflict, Bana had a respect for the intelligence of the rebels. He was certain if they found a homing beacon in something as precious as an A3 surveillance hub, they would be devious enough to disable it quickly, or to plant it somewhere as a trap for any pursuing agents. But there was also the very real possibility that no one had discovered it yet, and the hub was still inside and available for them to take. His brother, had he known about the location, would insist that they would take out the entire rebel cell just for good measure, but hopefully it wouldn't come to that. Despite his position in the agency and his family affiliations, Bana would prefer to get in and get out without much killing. Lee's reddish mind reached out across the road and connected to him. "You having fun, dear husband?" He grinned at the playful undertone of his wife's voice. "Are you, kitten?" "Yes. This building is deliciously unsecure." "So is it time?" he prompted. Yes, I think so. The hub seems to be in the storage on the second floor. No guards. Southwest side door?" He nodded slightly. "Meet you there in a few minutes." Bana put his handheld tracker into a backpack at his feet and zipped up the rifle bag. Leaving the gear, he got to his feet. Scene break. "Usher, wake up, but keep still. You don't want to pop your stitches." Hawk's voice burred with the dark static and the flowing, watery blue of his empathic energy. "Besides," he added, with an amused tone in his voice, "you're being watched." She wanted to sigh, turn over, and push him forcibly out of her mind so she could get some more sleep. She was so tired and sore, but she knew him well enough to recognise that tense undertone in his mental voice. How bad is it?" "It's not good. I'm almost certain our spy is among those left in the building. But that's not the biggest problem. There are 2 A0 agents in the building." "The hub already?" "Yes, Bana Mallah and Lena Meal." She tensed. "Hide it, Shanna. We've got to get everyone out." "No, it's too late. But there's a way through with minimal damages. Get everyone in the hub into the dining room. Call back Nama's crew and get Kita in here. We'll orientate from that position, using people and resources to resolve this quickly. Just don't panic." "Don't panic?" she thought incredulously. Do you know how good these two are? How dangerous? There was a mental chuckle. Yes, Sasha. But they also have weaknesses we can play on. There's a clear and simple way through this problem. Just be as good as I know you are, and it'll be fine. Scene 22. It was deliciously warm in the new base building. The marble exterior seemed to absorb the heat of the day and distribute it evenly throughout every room. All of its windows were intact, as were its floors and walls. It might even have insulation. It was perhaps the nicest rebel building Nalana had ever visited, despite the lack of electricity and having only one set of toilets that worked. She stood in a north-facing room on the first floor, bathed in sunlight. Grinning, she squidgied her toes into the soft, faded carpet with an inner squeal of delight. It was such a luxury for her to stay in a warm, dry place. She hoped they would stay there indefinitely. The sacking cloth she'd recycled and washed an hour ago was already dry on the windowsill. It was still stained grey and black from its previous incarnation as a rebel delivery bag, but it was all she could find for her purposes. She stood for another minute in the light and heat of such a perfect room, and turned back into the hallway that ran through the centre of the building. 2 or 3 rooms down the corridor, she saw Father Owen standing in a doorway with his back to her. She sensed he was introspective, with a deep frown in his empathic energy, as if he was worrying about something. She walked towards him and started folding the sacking cloth into a triangle. He seemed to sense her presence and turned around. She smiled. I have a sling for you. I'm sorry it looks kind of bad, but it should ease the pressure on your shoulder. Thank you. He crouched a little so she could tie the sling at his neck. When it was done, he glanced back into the room where Asha lay, still asleep. Is it true she's connected to Hawk? Nalana's heart skipped a beat and she gave him a deliberately playful smile. We're all connected to Hawk, even you. His blue eyes sparkled a little in amusement. Me? How am I connected to Hawk? She took him gently by the elbow and led him away as she continued to speak. You're connected because you're here. He wouldn't allow you to be here if there wasn't a reason. His voice was gentle, but ever so slightly correcting. He's just a man, Nalana, not a divine entity. He can't know everything. Yes, he is just a man, but he's also a time speaker. My grandmother once told me that the great fates, the great guardians of time, are weavers. What they weave is a huge unfinished tapestry that is time, and each thread is one person and their lives. A time speaker is a thread that the fates have put into the weaving deliberately to moderate those threads around them and keep the tapestry from breaking apart. Through to time speakers flows the intention and power of the fates, so that if you weren't meant to be here, he would know and you wouldn't be. One side of his mouth lifted up in amusement. Well, please don't take offence, Nalana, but my faith lies in the founder and his teachings, not an avowed man who channels the intentions of the old gods. Nalana guided him towards the stairs and the ground floor. She had distracted her new friend from Asha, which was good, both for Asha's continued recovery and because, despite being fond of Father Owen, she hadn't known him very long. It was one thing to risk herself on someone she didn't know well, but something completely different to risk Asha and, by association, Hawk. She grinned, deliberately dropping any negative or fearful thoughts. I bet you're hungry, Father. Whenever someone gets a bullet taken out by a Meshurin, they're usually ravenous for a few days after. Want to go down to the kitchen and see if there's anything to eat? I think rain unblocked one of the fireplaces last night for cooking, so you might even be able to get something hot. His smile was gentle again. That would be nice. I am hungry. Scene break. Agent Rahan Arya sat at his desk, scrolling through lines of programming code on his laptop. His free hand fiddled with the yellow sticky he had found on his bedside table that morning. The meaning of the sticky ate at the back of his mind and kept him from concentrating on any one thing at a time. His laptop sat in front of 4 flat screens, each of which were bisected into 6 camera views of different areas of the building. A rebel group could attack the supply depot from any angle, and he was supposed to be on alert. watching those screens at all times, but Raha couldn't concentrate, and programming calmed his nerves. From the outside, the building looked like an ordinary house. It had a white weatherboard exterior, 2 stories with bay windows, a broad front desk, and a perfectly manicured flower garden. At first glance, it looked like the house of some affluent family with an anal retentive gardener. But if someone was to stop to watch the place and document all the ins and outs activity, any person with half a brain would realise it was a government-run facility. It was constantly surprising to Raha that the place hadn't already been raided, but he still jumped when the nearby front door blew in with a cracking boom. 6 roughly dressed people piled in through the door and lifted their weapons towards him. Terrified, Raha stood and put his hands up. A dark-haired man came towards him with a handgun. He wore a battered leather jacket over a navy rag shirt and holly brown pants that was a little too short in the leg for his above-average height. "Come away from the screens." The man's dark blue eyes seemed to drill calmness into Raha, and he couldn't help but do as he asked. Sit in the corner there. If you do as I say, you'll be okay. We're just here to rob the place." Raha nodded at him and lowered himself onto the empty corner of the room across from his desk. The other rebels moved through the internal door into the rest of the building, and his guard paced slowly across to the desk. Several minutes passed by in silence as one by one rebels came from the right-hand door with armed loads of supplies from storage rooms, out through the front door, likely to some kind of vehicle, and then returned back past him to get more supplies. The tall guard sat against one corner of Rahan's desk, watching him warily. There was a calming aspect to the rebel that Rahan kind of felt drawn to. The man must have been in a fight recently, because there were lines of bruising around his eye and temple that looked at least a couple of days old. Raha sighed and looked down at the yellow sticky between his fingers. Perhaps it was a joke from the other guard who relieved him. Surely the rebels would have been told if there was a real escape plan for him. He turned it over and over in his fingers. If it was a joke, it was a cruel one. "What have you got there?" Rahan looked up at the man, then back at the sticky. He shrugged. "It's probably just a practical joke from my workmates." He frowned. "How so?" "Well, you guys might know better than I, but there's a rumour in the agency that when Hawk wants you to become a rebel, you'll find a yellow sticky note with instructions on it for your escape. They say he only puts on the sticky exactly what you need, no more, no less." "And what's on yours?" He sighed. "That's just it. There's nothing. Like I said, I think it's a cruel joke from one of my workmates." "You're disappointed." He said it as a statement, not a question. Rahan looked sideways at the man and nodded. The inside door opened, and in stepped another man who looked down at him with the yellowest eyes he'd ever seen. "Show it to me." A large hand was thrust into his face, and it took a few moments for him to realise that the man meant his note. He handed it over. "Where'd you find it?" The man barked. "On my bedstand this morning." It was given back to him. "Would it be impossible for someone to have put it there when they did?" He shrugged. "I hadn't really thought about it. I guess so." "What do you do? Are you talented or shy? What are your ratings?" A smidgen of hope flickered in Raha. "Computer talent, 910 rating. Base code specialist." The two men's eyes widened and they looked at each other. "We do need a good computer talent right now," said his original guard. There was silence for a long time, and Raha expected that they were both telepaths discussing the situation. He waited tensely. The yellow-eyed man looked sideways at him. "How would you like a crack at breaking into a mobile surveillance hub?" Sudden excitement lifted Raha to his feet and he grinned. "Would I? Those things are fantastic machines. Multi-encryption systems, layered storage capacity, mobile satellite access. I've always wanted to play with one of those." They both laughed, and the yellow-eyed man patted Rahan on the arm. "What's your name, kid?" "Rahan Arya, but everyone just calls me Raha." "Well, I'm Nama. This is Dale." The yellow-eyed man trailed off, and his broad, easy smile faded. "Haida, we gotta go, right now. If you're coming, do exactly what we say when we say it. No arguments, you got that?" Raha nodded emphatically. Yes, sir. Scene 23. Asha lifted her mouth into an obstinate expression. I'm doing this. I'm not taking any chance with the children's lives. It's not a chance because they'll be fine in the kitchen. Asha sensed a gentle amusement in Hawk. He hated it when he did that. It was so condescending. Sighing slightly, she ignored him and focused her attention on the little girl in front of her. Jenna's wide blue eyes looked out at her from the cramped dumbwaiter. Asha gave the girl an encouraging smile. Jenna, you're the grown-up now. I want you to look after your brothers, as well as Temper and Taman. Behind her, Nalana handed the torch and a small bag of food to Asha, and she passed it to the 8-year-old girl. Keep quiet and wait for one of us to find you. You got that? The girl nodded fearfully and looked past her. Nala? It's okay. Nalana stepped forward and reached to touch the girl's outstretched hand. We'll find you when it's safe again. It'll be like you're camping out. Just don't let Tim eat anything yucky. The girl laughed, relieving the tension in her. No spiders today, I promise. Asha pulled the dumb-weighted door and wrapped the rope around one arm, ready to lower the children into the basement. Hawk's voice spoke firmly in her mind. Tell Nalana to take your backup weapon to Tay. No! I put a gun in her hand, they'll shoot her for sure. We need to protect her, not put her in harm's way. Asha. His mental voice had a sudden undertone of unmistakable command. Do it. There's no risk in this because I know exactly what's going to happen. If you do as I say, she will be protected by a new friend of hers. She sighed. Nalana. Hand over hand, Asha started to manually lower the children into the basement. Take my spare weapon under my shirt. Go give it to Tay. Nalana did as she was told, lifting the back of her shirt up and taking the weapon out of its holster before turning to the side door. Asha watched the young woman step out of sight through the little cupboard that led out into the dining room. If that girl gets hurt, Asha, after all we have seen in the last 3 years, why do you still doubt me? The rope in her hands loosened, which meant that the dumbwaiter had got into the basement. She put the length of rope back into the slot in the side of the old-style dumbwaiter and turned around. She pulled her primary weapon. Because you're just a man, and a man makes mistakes. You treat the risks you take like they're a game of strategy. People are not pieces in your game to sacrifice at your whim. Walking around stone benches of the old kitchen, she reloaded her weapon and dropped the spent clip. It is not a game to me, Asha. We're waging a very dangerous war. People will die and continue to die until it's finished. I'm not cold to that, but neither am I naive to its necessity. Now concentrate. It's almost time, and you need to be sharp. Scene break. The dining room was beautiful to Nalana. It had a high ceiling that was carved with flowers in geometric shapes, a polished wooden floor, and varnished wall panels. There was a big old stone fireplace on one side that had also been carved with flowers and other shapes. Must have been a stunningly decadent house in its best days. About 15 people sat or stood on the dusty wood floor. Everyone was confused and afraid. No one knew what was going on, only that there was some kind of threat. Nalana looked around at all of the faces in the room and couldn't find Talon. Father Owen stood in the hall doorway, still in his black priest clothes and the sling Ed she'd given him. He seemed wary of whatever danger was coming. Father, have you seen Talon? He smiled at her and nodded. Yes, he's across the hall putting something away in storage. Thank you. As she stepped past him, there was a sense of a huge object rushing in her direction. Nalana turned to look down the hallway. A woman in black with short blonde hair ran towards her, weapon up, aimed and ready to kill her within a heartbeat. Nalana barely had time to gasp before Father Owen stepped in close, grabbed Asha's weapon from her fingers, turned with his body between her and the blonde woman, and fired. The woman tripped and fell as Nala stared. Father Owen grabbed her roughly, pulling her back into the dining room. He pushed her down onto the ground and covered her with his body. Scene break. Bana rushed after Lee only a moment behind her. He saw her drop, and the agony in her stomach pulsed empathically through him as well, blinding him for a microsecond. He roared in sudden grief and pain, but it dropped almost immediately into an icy cold rage. Jumping over her prone body and into a room on his left, Bana fired 3 times. Those in the room yelled fearfully and clambered out of the way. He hit 2 people square on, and they fell to the floor dead. A third was only clipped. No one seemed to be armed. To his right, in another room, he sensed somebody else. He bellowed as he strode out of the first room back into the hall towards the hidden person. Reaching, he gripped a mind that was very strong but completely undisciplined. The man yelled out. This one hurt Lee, Bana thought, as he roared again, pushing psychically at him. The figure screamed and fell to his knees, coming into physical sight as he collapsed on the floor. Something cold touched the back of Bana's neck and he froze. The empathic energy signature of a female materialized behind him. This person with a gun to his neck was a trained assassin, trained above at least A2. Let go of him. The mind behind the gun was iron tight, so he couldn't launch telepathically into her before she shot him. The cold rage he'd felt dissipated quickly into an aching pain. Defeated, he psychically let go, and the dark-haired man on the floor whimpered in relief. "Tay, you all right?" said the icy voice behind him. The man groaned from the floor, and Bana glanced at him, surprised that such a sensitive mind was still conscious enough to respond after his attack. Behind Bana and his captor, Lee called out to him wordlessly. He sensed her terror and reached back to her mind. "I'm here, my love. We'll be together soon." She grasped desperately at his mental touch for a few moments, and then death pulled her away. Bana lowered his chin and closed his eyes. Tears ran freely down his face. "Drop your weapon and get on your knees." Lowering down to the floor, he put his weapon on the ground and pushed it back towards her. A hand touched his shoulder. "Let me knock you out, Bana." It was then he recognised her voice. "Asha? Asha Khan?" "Yes, let me in." He looked sideways over his shoulder. "Aren't you going to kill me now?" "No. For the moment, Hawk wants you alive."